everyone. Today we're going to go over the review sheet. Question 1. Fill in the chart by converting between a fraction, decimal, and a percent. So for the first one, they give us that the percent is 65. Remember, if I was to put a decimal point, the decimal point would be after the 5. So I have to move it over 2 places to the left to get a decimal. When I move it 2 places over to the left, my new decimal is 0.65. And then to convert that to a fraction, I take the percent, which is 65, and put it over 100. So 65 over 100. For the second question, they give you a decimal of 0.8. So I want to start by converting that to a percent. So to convert that 0.8 to a percent, I'm going to move the decimal place 2 places to the right. So now I have that space. I'm going to fill in that space with a 0, so that becomes 80. So 80%. And to make that a fraction, I take the percent and put it over 100. So 80 out of 100. The third question, 1/4 is the fraction. So to convert the fraction to a decimal, I'm just going to divide in my calculator 1 divided by 4. When you do 1 divided by 4 in your calculator, you should get 0.25. So here we just divide. And then to make that decimal a percent, we're going to move the decimal places 2 places to the right. And now I'm at 25, so 25%. Question 2, write the 2% proportions that we learned in class. So the first percent proportion that we learned was part over whole equals percent over 100. The other percent proportion that we learned was is over of equals percent over 100. Question 3, use a percent proportion to solve the following. So we're going to use one of the proportions that we wrote in question 2 to solve question 3. Question 3 says, Mrs. Jones hired a florist for her wedding. The florist is going to charge her $5,000 to supply the flowers for the wedding. The florist requires a 15% deposit. How much money does Mrs. Jones have to pay the florist as the deposit? So we're looking to find 15% of the total amount, which is $5,000. So $5,000 is the total amount. You can also label that as the whole. And to write my percent proportion, it would be part over whole equals percent over 100. So filling in everything, here, the total amount of money that it's going to cost for the flowers is $5,000. So that's going to go down here in the whole section, $5,000. The percent is 15, so that will go in the percent section. The bottom right is always going to be 100. So I don't know how much of that $5,000 that we need to pay for the deposit, so I'm going to label that as X. Remember, whatever we don't know, we make it a variable. Now I want to solve this by cross multiplying. So I'm going to cross multiply. X times 100 is 100x equals 5,000 times 15. Put 5,000 times 15 into your calculator. You'll get 75,000. To solve for x, you want to get x by itself. So right now 100 is multiplying x. The opposite of multiplication is division. So we divide both sides by 100. It will cancel on the left. X equals 75,000 divided by 100. If you put that into your calculator, you'll get 750. And then we want to add the unit. So in this case, the problem is asking you how much money does she have to pay. So I'm just going to put a dollar sign here. $750. Question 4. Use either the percent proportion or a percent equation to solve the following. So for the first one, I'll use the percent proportion, and for the other one, I will use the percent equation. You can do whichever method that you prefer. So if I was to use the percent proportion for the first one, the question says 45 is what percent of 6,000? So because I see the word is and of, I'm going to use the percent proportion that has is over of equals percent over 100. Now, I'm going to fill in the parts of my proportion. So, at the beginning, it says 45 is, so I'm filling 45 into the is portion. What percent? So I don't know the percent, which means that in the percent slot, I'm going to put in an X. Remember, when you don't know the amount, you put in a variable, and we usually use X. Of 6,000 means in that of section, I'm putting in, 600. In the of section, I'm putting in 600. And then in the bottom right, it always is 100, always stays the same. Now we're just going to cross multiply to solve for X. So I'm going to cross multiply here. 600 multiplied by X, 600 times X is just 600. X equals 45 times 100 will be 4,500. Now you want to solve for X. To get X by itself, we're going to divide by 600 on both sides. And then it'll cancel on the left. When we do 4,500 divided by 600, you'll get 7.5. I'm just going to put a percent symbol at the end. So X equals 7.5%. Then the other question, this one says, what is 30% of 500? This one I'm going to use the percent equation. Remember, when you use the percent equation, you're just directly translating. So this says, what is 30% of 500? So what, whenever you see the word what, and I don't know what it is, I let that be the variable. In this case, it's the variable X. Is always means equal sign. 30%. 30% I need to convert to a decimal. And remember, if it's 30%, the decimal point is actually behind the 0. So I move it 2 places to the left, and now I have 0.30. Of means that I multiply. And then the 500, we're just going to keep as 500. So putting that all together, X equals 0.30 times 500. So now X is already by itself, so I just need to simplify 0.30 times 500. And when you do 0.30 times 500, you'll get X equals 150. Question 5. The number of students in the school district this year is 650. Next year, the number of students in the district will be 20% lower. How many students will be in the district next year? So this current school year has 650 students, and next year it's going to be 20% lower. So there are two methods to solve this problem. You can use either one. I'm going to show you both, but you only need to do one when you're doing this on your own. So method one is we're going to find the 20% first, and then we are going to subtract. So when it says lower, that means that I subtract. I'm getting smaller. So for method one, I find 20% of 650. So 20%, I convert that to a decimal. So if the decimal point is behind the zero, move it over twice. Now I'm at 0.20 of, means that I multiply, 650. When you do 0.20 times 650 in your calculator, you will get 130. And now I'm going to take my original amount of 650 and subtract the 20%, which was 130, to find how much I'm left with. When you do 650 minus 130, you'll get 520 students. In this case, remember, we're talking about student enrollment. And now I'm going to show you method two. Method two is when we deal with the percents first. So remember, we always start with 100%. And in this case, it's going to be 20% lower next year. So that means I'm going to subtract the 20% to see how much I have left. When you do 100 minus 20, we'll get 80%. Now, you want to find 80% of the initial amount. So 80% of the initial amount was 650. That 80 we want to convert to a decimal before we multiply. So the decimal point is behind the zero. Move it 2 places to the left. And now you're left with 0.80 of, means that I multiply, 650. So when we do 0.80 times 650, we'll get 520. And again, this problem, we're talking about how many students. So I'm going to write students as my label. Notice if I did method one or if I did method two, I got the same answer. Question number 6. Your Verizon bill last month was $405. Verizon just notified you that your bill starting next month will be going up by 5%. What will your monthly payments be next month? So last month it was $405, and it will be going up by 5%. So going up means that we're going to have an increase. We're going to add. Our number will get bigger. So we're going to do both methods again. However, you only need to do one, really, to get the answer and for your test. So for method one, first I'm going to find 5% of 405. So that 5, there was a decimal place, it would be after the 5. To make it a decimal, we move the decimal place 2 places to the left, and when there's that loop, we're going to fill in a 0. So 5% is 0.05 of, remember, means that we multiply by 405. When you do 0.05 times 405 in your calculator, you'll get 20.25. Then I need to add that 20.25 to my original amount because we're going up. So when we're going up, we're getting bigger. So my original amount was 405. Now I'm going to add that 5%, which was $20.25. And when you add those together, you'll get $425.25. I put a $sign because remember they're asking for a monthly payment, so we're talking about money here. Now we're going to do method 2. So method 2 is when we calculate the total percentage first. So the percentage we always start with is 100. And then when we go up by 5%, we're going to add 5%. 100 plus 5 is 105%. So now I need to find 105% of my original amount, and that was 405. So we need to convert the percent to a decimal. So I put in my decimal place, which is behind the 5 at the end. Move it over 2 places. I have 1.05. Of means that I multiply. And then we're going to bring down the 405. So in your calculators, you're typing in 1.05 times 405. And when you do that, you're going to get $425.25. So notice we get the same answer no matter which method we use, and you can choose which method you want to do. For question 7, in December, Mrs. Valentino's son, Mark, ran a total of 120 miles. This was a 20% decrease from the number of miles that he ran in November. How many miles did Mark run in November? So this is an original amount question. That's what we're looking for here, because they're giving you the December amount, and we need to go back and find how much that he ran in November, which was an earlier amount. So for the original amount problems, we always use the part over whole equals percent over 100. So in this problem, it says that in December, he ran a total of 120 miles, and this was a 20% decrease. So I'm going to use those numbers to fill in my proportion. So remember, the bottom right always stays at 100. That one doesn't change. So the part is always going to be the new amount, and the new amount is the December amount, the more recent amount, which is 120. For the whole is the original amount. That's what we're trying to find. So because we don't know that, we make that x. And then for the percent, well, I know that there was a 20% decrease. So what I have to do on the side is start with 100. Decrease means that we're subtracting, we're getting smaller. So I'm subtracting 20%. When we do 100 minus 20, you get 80%. So 80 is going to go in that percent column. To solve this, we are going to cross multiply. X times 80, or is 80x, 80 times x, so 80x equals, then you need to do 120 times 100. When you do 120 times 100, you'll get 12,000. To solve for x, I will divide by 80 on both sides. It will cancel on the left. X equals 12,000 divided by 80. You'll get 150. And then in this case, we're talking about miles that he ran. So 150 miles. And this makes sense because it says that in December it was 120, and that was a decrease from the original amount. So 120 should be a smaller amount, which is true. We went from 150 and then we decreased to 120.